Okay, if nobody has any other announcements or anything, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Mike.
So I've been a member of Gwinnett for about 15 years. When I got off the road traveling, I thought I was interested in getting into woodworking. I knew that, so I was able to, when I quit traveling, I was able to get up on Saturday mornings and come to the meetings, and did that about, like I say, about 15 years ago. And then I started going to the wood-turning meetings. Actually, I started that after I had a opportunity to get introduced to wood-turning by Jack Morse, and lo and behold, I got fell into the vortex and got hooked, and now I'm a wood-turning junkie. For those of y'all not into wood-turning, I make a few videos, so that's my wood-turning channel on YouTube. I've got about 350 videos out there to look at. How many people in here do not own a lathe? Just so I can kind of see where we're coming from. Those of y'all that own a lathe, who has not turned in the last 2 years? Everybody? Well, that's good. Okay. So what I want to do, I want to talk a little bit about wood turning in general, but specifically we're going to make a what I call an elegant awl. You know, how many of y'all don't have an awl in your workbox, toolbox? Why not? You know, this is really a handy tool. You can use it as a scratch awl. It's a great hole starter. I use it to hold my templates when I'm cutting bowl blanks. I made a little special purpose, one little tiny one, and it's stored over there with the templates. I see, every time I see these videos or people demonstrating, and they're looking for a hammer, they're getting a nail, and they're hammering this thing in, or they're having to get a screwdriver and find a screw and screw it in. It's like, man, you just pop this thing in there and you cut it out on your bandsaw. It's just so much easier. So that's one use of an awl. We'll talk about grinds a little bit later. So we're going to turn an awl. Piece of wood I'm going to use this morning is a piece of persimmon, because I've never made a handle out of persimmon. It's an ebony. It's the only true ebony that we have in the United States. It's very, very hard. I think they used to make golf clubs out of it, drivers back in the old day. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to turn between centers. That means between the headstock and the drive and the tailstock with the live center. These are mounted in what's called a Morse taper. It's a finely machined fitting that when you pop this thing in there, it's a nice friction fit. Keep it that way. You need to clean it out periodically. I use I think it's a 20 gauge shotgun brush. You can kind of clean it out to keep the thing from galled, because if you get crud in there and try to use it with a drive center, sooner or later you're going to destroy your spindle, and that is a maintenance issue. So you take a block of wood. Now this is my preferred handle shape. I'll pass a box of these around in just a moment. There's lots of different shapes you make, but I'm going to use the one that I typically make. You got to mark the center. There's all kinds of fancy center markers that you can get. You can lay a ruler from here to here. I find that the ruler thing takes a little while, plus it doesn't work, for me it doesn't work real well with crudely cut blanks, which a lot of my blanks are crudely cut off a bandsaw or a chainsaw. So if you get a trapezoid that's irregular shaped, you don't necessarily get real good results. So if you just brace your finger, just make you a smaller little square, give you something to aim for, and then it's real easy to get in the middle of that. And this is just a whole lot faster. And you don't have to be perfectly centered. About the only time I don't do this if I'm using uranium enriched wood for making a box or something. That's that very, very expensive wood you get from Woodcraft, or you order from Craft Supply. It comes from Central and South America. That's extremely expensive. So I usually use a center punch. This is a Harbor Freight model. I turned a little handle. And now with this target, I generally put it down here, and then I think of that imaginary line coming between here, and then one coming down to the middle, and I stop, and the spring load punches. And that gets real close. That generally get within a 1/16 of an inch. When you practice, your eye gets better and better, so you don't miss it. I'm using this particular, it's called a steb center. It's got these little teeth. These do not come with the lathe. It's an aftermarket accessory. It's not necessary, but the ones that come with lathes generally have either 2 or 4 teeth, and they don't bite into it very well, especially the 4 teeth, because no matter what you do, you're cutting against the grain, and it's hard to get enough pressure on it. You got to hammer them in. It's kind of old school where you used to take wood turning consisted of mostly making balusters and table legs, and you'd take you'd have a jig and you'd put this thing up against your bandsaw and cut slots in it, and it'd fit against that and it'd hold pretty well. But so we're going to bring this up and then tighten it up. The first thing we're going to do, I brought a little small tool rest. We'll have to adjust it a couple of times to get this thing round. First thing you do is get this thing round. Eye protection. I tell people when I'm teaching wood turning, I said, all right, close your eyes for just a moment. Now now imagine yourself stepping up to the lathe and picking up a tool, and then by then their eyes open up. It's like, that's what's going to happen if you don't wear eye protection. In a blink of an eye, you're liable to be a blind person. That doesn't prevent you from turning. There's a blind program downtown where they actually teach wood turning. Georgia Association Wood Turners does some teaching. I didn't see what belt we were on. This is a very nice lathe. They don't make this model anymore. And it's got 2 belt changes. The little mini lathes are very nice. The jet ones are very nice. They've got some that are pure belt driven and some of them that have a potentiometer and some sort of variable frequency drive. So, you know, I tell people there's only 3 things you really have to learn about wood turning. If it's almost sharp, it'll almost cut. And then you anchor the tool against the tool rest, ride the bevel. This is the bevel. It's the part that's been ground away. You're cutting with the very edge, so theoretically you're not cutting on the bevel. You got to raise it a little bit. If there's not a little bit of a gap down here at the bottom, obviously you're not going to engage in the wood. But if you always get in the habit of riding the bevel, lifting the handle until you start seeing shavings, and then moving the direction of your desired direction of the cut. I'm turning at 1300. This is the safest way to hold a small part like this. It's very hard for anything to go wrong. Turn the speed up. Nobody's asked me what that 3rd item was yet. The 3rd item is you've always got to cut with supported grain, and we'll get into that a little more detail. And you always turn this thing. Safety, like I say, there's 3 main things to learn as a beginner. The rest of it's just safety and details on projects. Now, when you do this, it helps if you kind of anchor yourself. You don't keep your hands out here. Use your whole body. Drop the handle, anchor it. You put your finger up here to block the chips. Some tool rests. Some people like to guide their fingers against the tool rest, depending on the shape. Now with a small block like this, generally before I get it completely round, what I like to do is go ahead and put a tenon on it, because sometimes if you get overzealous and you make it perfectly round, you don't have enough room to put a tenon to hold it strongly in a chuck, and I'll show that in just a moment. Wood turning doesn't have to be expensive. Matter of fact, they say the lathe is the cheapest part, the rest of it's tools, but even tools don't have to be expensive. This is a Harbor Freight tool. I use it. It's not the best, but it's lightweight, so it's easy to transport when I'm not doing a whole lot of roughing. This is a tool I made out of 8mm high-speed steel. So when this is called a beating and parting tool. Most people don't use these, but once I made one, this has been one of the handiest tools I've got. Generally speaking, you go straight in until you slice the fibers. With hardwood, might not make a lot of difference, but softwood like pine or poplar, it'll fray if you don't. Once you penetrate the fibers, you then just drop the handle and take a peeling cut. Now I've got a pretty good idea how big a tenon I need for my chuck, because I've been using it a long time. But one of the techniques, you got to check it out on your particular lathe and your particular live center. But a lot of times, try it out and see what works for you. You can put a pencil here and you can mark it, and that may get real close to what your chuck needs. All right, so now I've got a tenon. It's got the object of a tenon is something that your chuck can grab hold of, scroll chuck. And one of the first popular scroll chucks on the market was by Technitool out of New Zealand. They no longer manufacture in New Zealand, they manufacture in China. Some of them use different kinds of keyed mechanisms. One of their smaller chucks that Dan likes uses a Tommy bar system. It's kind of old school, uses two sticks to rotate. And it's a very nice chuck, especially for smaller lathes. The Tommy bar is I have kind of a, I won't even say a love-hate relationship, mostly a hate relationship. Because these things don't cost $1,000, they're not machined to that kind of tolerance. You need to come around and tighten it a couple of times, because there is a certain amount of slop that you want to take out of it. But when I made that tenon, I made sure that it was parallel. Some chucks have dovetails, some chucks have parallel tenons. This one requires a parallel tenon. You want to make sure you got a nice clean shoulder, because the strength doesn't come from clamping. The strength comes from the mechanical action of the face of the jaw set against that flange. Now, as a general rule, this is a very strong hold, and I could probably turn the whole thing unsupported, but I'm just in a habit of always using the live center as long as I can for safety purposes. So first thing I'm going to do is take this down a little bit. I'm going to add a ferrule to this. Now, a ferrule is this object right here. It's this round thing that kind of helps hold the wood in place. It doesn't prevent the handle from breaking. What it does is provides enough strength and structural integrity that you're not going to lose the tool. It's not going to come flying out. You'll see every wood turning tool has a ferrule, unless it's an aluminum or steel, and it's just kind of built in. You can make ferrules out of all kinds of materials. Yeah, I'll pass this box around to give you some example of ferrule materials. If you ever replace a faucet in your house, bathroom, or sink, you'll wind up with more brass plumbing parts than you'll know what to do with, and they all make great ferrules, some of them heavy duty. Copper couplers do great. They're very inexpensive. They're about $1 a piece or less. There's two different models. Get the cheap one. I couldn't tell you the difference. One of them is designed to fasten pipe a little different way, but it costs like 50% more when it's still just a piece of copper. And you can put this on a mandrel and cut it in half, and if I have time I'll show you how we do that. You can make them out of steel, you can make them out of brass fittings. If you've got threaded pieces, you can actually take the threads down and make that a design feature. You don't have to eliminate them, just take the sharp edges off. This is my preferred one now, if I have it, and it is, anybody recognize what that is?
It's too small.
It's the inner race of a ball bearing that comes off my bandsaw. This is the larger outside race to one of those ball bearings. Now, today I'm going to use a piece of a copper pipe, which is real inexpensive. A neighbor gave me this pipe. So if you get a pipe like this, if you got a pipe cutter, you just cut it with that pipe cutter. If you got a hacksaw, it's more of a challenge and you get rough edges. So I'm going to use that. So you take the one you're going to use and you kind of mark it out with a pencil. I put a rare earth magnet on here with electrical tape, and that way I can generally find it if I can remember to put it on the lathe. I like to have about a 1/16 of an inch proud. This line's going to go away first time I touch this thing. It's better, instead of measuring it, if you have some type of visual reference, so I can look at this and say, oh, if that goes right up against the edge, that looks like a little bit of wood will stick out, so there's my visual reference. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this thing down. And if you don't need an awl in your toolbox, you can always just change the handle shape, make it a little longer, and make an ice pick. Kind of old school. How many of us use an ice pick? Anybody that tailgates, right? As I found out the one tailgating party I went to. So I can kind of get some idea where I am. So we'll just keep. Now this thing is dovetailing a little bit. It's tapering. I want a little taper, but not much. So I'm going to just twist the tool a little bit so I can come in. This thing almost acts like a little skew chisel. And now we do what we call successive approximation. We just put just a little bit of chamfer on it. Then we can bring this up and see if it slides on. Not quite. So then we take it flat again, down to just about the bottom of that front edge of that chamfer. And I'll square it up a little bit, and then we try again. Put another little chamfer on it. And you do this as many times as necessary. Not only do you do this on ferrules, you do this on boxes or any parts you're trying to fit together on the lathe. Pretty basic technique. Now, this is the point. Once I finally get it down to the right shape, this is where I take it off the lathe and I actually glue the ferrule on. So I can, it helps guide my eye, and then when I bring the shape down, as I'll show you in a little while, you can bring it right down to the ferrule. We're just getting rid of a little bit of dust here, a little bit of chamfer so it'll slide over. And this can get kind of fussy. When you do cut aluminum pipe, you got to remember that it's, you're going to get little ridges in there, so you got to get a little, you either use a plumber's reamer, which I don't think I brought with me, or you use a dowel, which I think is going around with a piece, no, here it is. Twist you a dowel around a piece of sandpaper and just get rid of that ridge, at least on the back edge that's going to slide over. Back here. Otherwise you'll get a false reading. Now I've overshot my mark just a little bit, but that's okay. Epoxy will normally take care of that. What I normally do at this time, I didn't bring any glue with me today because I'm not sure to have time to let it set up. What I normally do is I take this off the lathe, chuck and all, mix up some epoxy. I save these whatever stacks, whatever, you know, these plastic containers to mix up my epoxy. You could use medium or thick CA. I just don't like it because it's kind of brittle. I think epoxy works better. It doesn't make a difference. 5 minute, 30 minute, just any kind of epoxy. Then what are these called? That's what we call them when we grew up. Now they call them craft sticks. So you can buy a box. You can buy a big chunk of these things usually at the dollar store for about $1, and they're great for mixing up your epoxy and other glue projects. So when you put these things, ideally it'll be snug and it'll just fit on there. And then the trick is you take the other one like this and set it on top, and then you can use a mallet if you have one, or a tool handle, and you can just kind of tap it into place. So we're going to pretend that that's glued on there now. Now we start shaping the handle. So handle shapes, they come in all different sizes and shapes. This is a kind a lot of y'all familiar with, or maybe a scratch awl, not a bad shape. But my preferred awl shape is kind of big flat handle like that, and I call these elegant awls because I usually try to kick them up a notch with a little bit of embellishment on the end, and I'll show you that. So I'm going to pass these around. So this block of wood, I said, is about 2 by 2 inches square, It's about 3.5 inches long. The actual handle itself is right at 2.5 inches long, including the ferrule. Might vary a little bit based on the size of your ferrule. And then that gives you room to part it off back here safely without worrying about getting tangled up in the chuck. So what I do is I put the tip of this, line it up here, mark it with a pencil. No real measurement, just kind of relative reference here. And normally I get it round before I get it to this point. So I'm going to go ahead and get it round, but before I lose that pencil mark, I'm going to use this very expensive parting tool. I think this bar of 1/8 inch steel cost about $5. There's a handle with a ferrule made from a compression fitting. I knocked the edges off, and that's about all. Make sure it clears it. So all I'm going to do is mark the end of the tool. And I like to usually mark the end of a project like that because that way my eye doesn't get fooled. It helps my design process. It helps me know where those lines are going. And one slip of the tool, it's still there, whereas a pencil mark might disappear. So we're going to come back and round this thing off. Now I'm using what they call a spindle roughing gouge. You never use these on a bowl. How many of y'all ever used a tool like this on a bowl? And will admit it. You know, the reason for it, these are stamped or forged. They've got a very, very thin, narrow shank, which makes it the weakest tool you've got when you're doing cross grain. I said that there's 3 things you got to know as a beginner. We talked about 2 of them. Number 1 is if it's almost sharp, it'll almost cut. Number 2, you got to know your ABCs. Anchor the tool, ride the bevel, lift the handle till it cuts. The 3rd one is understanding grain direction. So when we think about a pencil, you know, this doesn't work with young kids because parents don't let them have pocket knives. But when we grew up, we all had a pocket knife. We all knew how to sharpen pencil, right? You go from large end to the small end. Well, that's cutting with a grain because you've got supporting fibers. You start to cut, and as you cut down, there's fibers out in front that support the cut. It's not the only way to cut, but it gives you the cleanest cut. If you tried to cut it this way, you know, it's going to pluck up the fibers every time. So sometimes on some woods you can be sort of successful and get something cut, but you're not going to get your best cut. So in this case, this is a big pencil. We're going from large to small. If it was a bowl in what we normally have face grain or perpendicular grain, whereas this is parallel with a bedway, they call it parallel orientation, or typically spindle orientation. But with face grain, you got side grain, which is easier to cut, and with the grain, which is fairly easy to cut, and then you got end grain, which is hard to cut. So every time it comes around, you're going to hit that end grain twice on a bowl. It puts a tremendous amount of stress on your spindle roughing gouge. Y'all got any questions, just holler out. One of the initiatives that AAW has taken on in recent years is initiative to try to get more women into wood turning. And they've done that by a number of ways, communicating, supporting women the women in turning subgroup, if you will, of AAW. They've encouraged every club to have a woman as their ambassador for women in turning. And they've started sponsoring some special events. They have a get-together at Airmont every year. About 60 ladies get together and rent the school or rent the wood turning shop in any case, and drink a little wine and learn how to turn wood and make jewelry and learn about pyrography and embellishing techniques and all other aspects, and they get some really fine wood turners. I attended Airmont this summer, and Beth Ireland was my instructor, just a fabulous instructor, very creative lady. All right, now we got it round. So now we start looking at the next shape. So we got the place for the ferrule. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start coming down. So I want to look at what's the high point. So there's the high point right there. That's the part that I'm going to cut from. Cut toward the back and cut to the front and try not to make the line go away. So I'm going to change tools and I'm going to go to what they call a spindle gouge. So the difference in these is how the flute is milled. In this case, the flute is milled, I forget what percentage, but not so much. This one, it's much deeper, and it comes up. So if you look at it, this one looks thinner this way, because it is thinner this way. This one comes up higher, and each side acts a little bit like an I-beam. Think about a structural beam, and it's got that I-beam on each side, giving it in structural integrity. That milling dictates what kind of grinds. You can vary a certain amount on how you grind this thing, the profile, but you can't turn a bowl gouge into a spindle gouge, and you can't turn a spindle gouge into a bowl gouge because the way it's milled. They're each going to have a different profile on the front. You can sweep the wings back and you can do some different things, but there's still going to be a fundamental difference in how that shape. This one can be a little pointier than this one. Then you've also got another variation of the spindle gouge. This one is milled even less than this one, and as a result, the point, when you sharpen it, it tends to get kind of pointy, so you can get down deep into crevices, if you will, for doing detail work, and you still have a lot of tremendous strength because there's so much steel under it. So we're going to take this down. We're going to start using the spindle gouge. Now, because this is going to be the highest point, this is going to be the lowest point, I don't start cutting from here. Seems kind of basic, but I've seen a lot of beginners, and they want to start cutting at the big point, at the largest diameter, and pretty soon it's not a large diameter anymore because they keep going back and cutting from that area. So since I know this is the part that's going to go away, that's the part I'm going to, at least initially, start my cutting on. Now, if this had a ferrule on it, I know there'd be a little distance in there. You know, it would be a little more proud, and I would have to stop my cut there. So I've got to keep that in mind, that there's not a brass or copper finial there. Now, I like to put a little detail here, this bead. It's a decorative feature, but as you'll see later in another step, it's also part of the, it's going to be integral to a future step, the way I make it. This is not the only way to make one of these things. May not be the best way to make one of these awls, but it's the way that I do it after considerable practice and research and reading other people's work. I published an article in Woodturning Design, rest in peace, a number of years ago, and I've got I was talking to the editor of the American Woodturner at Free Magazine over there. He said, you know, we're still looking for some beginner articles, and you know, when I hear that people talk about, hey David, well, a magazine is all artsy and fartsy, and I said, well, here's my take on it. I published about 7 articles in American Woodturner. I turn mostly simple, basic stuff. All my articles are basic, simple articles, and they've been published. So that's one of my arguments for it's not always overly artsy-fartsy. And this was one of my most popular videos, the one on doing it all. So I suggested that to him. He said, yeah, I like that. So that was this summer I talked to him when I was out in Portland at the symposium. And so I submitted the concept, and he bought into it, and I cranked that article in a week or so, and just finished editing it, and it'll be in the December issue. Okay, now this is kind of a fat bead, probably a little fatter than it ought to be. I could make it a little bit smaller. I think I will. And to get down in there, I think I'm going to use the detail gouge because it's got that longer point. It's a little easier to get down in there. It's not great for cutting beads, but it's great for cutting details. Now, what I like to do sometimes is add a little, add these burn rings. It kind of gives it a nice detail, and they're super easy to make. You can use any kind of wire, just about copper. This is an old guitar string my son gave me. Copper works fine. It just doesn't last as long because you get it hot over and over, and it hardens. Anneals it works well. Annealing, I think, is softening it, right? It hardens it, and so eventually it's going to break. But you know, copper grounding wire, or 14 gauge, it's cheap. But this works real well for me. How many of y'all know Bob Aldea? So Bob Aldea was over my shop one time when Butch Davis was doing some kind of pins for troops, and we were turning some pin blanks, and I was doing this like this, and Bob was turning on a mini lathe, and I turned on my Powermatic, and he said, if you drop your hands in front, you'll get a whole lot more friction. It's like, yeah. Now, how long would it have taken me to figure that out? I don't know. I'm a slow learner sometimes, maybe a long time, but it's amazing what you learn when you're working with somebody else. Bob's wife's got some health issues, and he's got some health issues, so we don't see him as often as we used to. All right, so we can go back to spindle gouge. So I look at this and I think, well, okay, I want this kind of round. I'm going to come over here, start down. Now, I could put another bead on it like this one. I think I might do that just because I can. Here's another very inexpensive tool. It's a point tool made out of a 1/4-inch piece of high-speed steel. Enco used to sell this very inexpensively, 8-inch length. They use it in the metal industry as a cutting, parting tool on metal lathes. But they got bought out by MSC Direct, and the cost more than doubled. But I found that you can buy these on Amazon in 7mm, which is just a skosh bigger than a 1/4-inch. And actually, it's probably a skosh bigger, is a little bit better. And they're 4 inches long, and 4 inches is plenty. If I measured that, I think we'd find 4 inches. It'd still be down into the tool. So we're going to just use this, make a bit of a groove there. You do need to have a place to capture this burn wire. I'm going to kind of make more of a cove look to this thing. Do get your tool rest out of the way before you use your burn wire. You don't want to get wrapped around. I did a little video on burn wires the other day, and I had so many people give me so many different ways that they would do it. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of interesting. They said, the way you're doing it is kind of dangerous because, if the wire breaks, you're going to fall into the lathe. Well, I don't think so. I'm pressing down, and I got my feet planted. I'm not going to fall in. And then they says, we think it's better if you hook it around and pull it towards you. It might work for them. It doesn't work for me. Then others said, well, push down on both sides. Well, same thing. My way works for me, but it is not the only way. I taught a few classes up at Eagle Ranch. This ranch, I said, the AAW got them an educational opportunity grant to help get them started with their studio with GAW's help. And boy, those kids, any project that you make with them wood turning, you can guarantee, I guarantee you, you give an option of a burn wire and they're going to put burn rings on it. It doesn't make any difference what it is. There's something about it. They like that fire. So now that I got the back of this thing marked, time to go ahead and start defining it a little bit more. Now when you part down, you can only part down so deep before it'll start binding. So you got to kind of step away and make an extra part, one to a half a tool thickness to 1 tool thickness, so it doesn't bind. Now we can finish shaping this thing a little bit. We're going to round this edge over here a little bit. Now we can start shaping the back. I'm pressing too hard, not letting the tool do the work, so it's building up friction and getting kind of hot. If I did that too long and turned into a burn ring. Almost did. Just let the tool do the work. Okay, so that's given me a pretty good shape. Now, this is about this point in time, this is when I'd start sanding it. I've learned a new trick. I got motivated by one of the guys online that does wet sanding, and then I really got pushed over the edge by Sam Angelo, the Wyoming woodturner. I don't know if y'all watch him. He's a great YouTuber, thread chaser. He's got about 22 videos out there on thread chasing. So back when I got interested in thread chasing, he was my hero. So you just rub it on with this is a little beeswax and mineral oil. And what that allows you to do is to sand, and it creates a slurry, and it captures all the fine dust. So y'all really don't have to breathe this stuff. Y'all tell me if you see any dust. Slow this thing down. You want to get it down to probably no more than about 600 or so when you're sanding. Keep it moving. If you do see dust, it's time to put a little more what I call sanding butter on there.
Does that tend to clog the sandpaper?
It does and it doesn't. It does fill in between the grits, but what it actually does is makes the sandpaper last longer. It sands cooler. Now, if you get too heavy a buildup, you've either got to discard it or clean it. You can actually soak this in mineral oil, a little water, almost anything. As long as you're using a sandpaper that's cloth back, something that's suitable for wet sanding, you can just kind of give it this number or run it against your tool rest to break it loose some. Lots of different ways to get some of it out. The biggest thing is just getting some practice and experience, which frankly I'm still on a learning curve of how much of this stuff to put on here that you don't get just a wax buildup that's kind of messy. But it does run cooler. It cuts better. The sandpaper or the abrasive will last longer. But mostly, the biggest benefit I think is it captures all that really fine dust in a slurry that keeps it from you getting in the air and you breathing it. It also can get in the pores of the wood and fill it in for a nicer, smoother surface. Now on a tool handle, you probably don't need to go much more than about 240 anyway, because it's a tool handle. It's not a piece of prize bowl. Now, before we go too much further.
Mike?
Uh-huh.
Is that a 50-50 mix of beeswax and mineral oil?
No, that's a good question. It's actually a 1 to 4. If you had been able to come up to our hands-on wood turning Tuesday, you could have participated as we made that and made an abrasive paste, and everybody walked home with a batch of sanding butter and abrasive paste.
Beeswax and what?
Mineral oil.
Which one's one?
Now you can do other things. How many of y'all use U-Butte Triple E? You know, great for pen turners. It's got a very fine abrasive in there. But the problem, you can call it a problem, it's not as green as some other things because it's got some type of volatile organic compounds in there, like mineral spirits. Not good to get it on your hands, not good to be breathing it all the time. So you're better off with something that's not. And one of the things that's not, you could use walnut oil. It's a little more expensive, but it is a hardening oil. Or you can use mineral oil, which comes out of the ground. It's basically a paraffin. I think they call it liquid paraffin in Europe or in Great Britain instead of mineral oil. But we know that we use mineral oil as a laxative, so it's certainly food safe. It can evaporate, but generally the shelf life when you mix this stuff up lasts a long, long time compared to something that's got a VOC in it.
What's the ratio again?
1 to 4, but you know it varies with what you like.
Which is which?
Beeswax is 1 and mineral oil is 4.
Okay.
We're going to drill a hole now. Little tip here. I try to always, with small drill bits, to put it in my drill chuck off the lathe because I can see if it's centered. Every now and then you can get one in there when you're doing it sideways like this, where it's already in the lathe, and it's not centered. And guess what? It wallows a big hole because this doesn't turn, but it'll be off center. So if you do it off the lathe, you wind up with a much higher degree of success. Now, I drill a hole about 1 1/4 inch deep for this, you know, give or take. I'm using a 4-inch shaft. So let's talk about the metal a little bit. There's lots of things you can make these shafts out of. Some people advocate using a drill bit. Well, if you can get a long drill bit, or you got a bunch of them, that's a great item. You use the threaded portion to bury, and then you use the shaft of the thing to make your awl out of. But they're pretty expensive, and they're not routine. You don't routinely find the longer bits, and it's an expensive solution, even if it can be a good one. You don't want to use a nail; it's too soft, won't hold an edge. So I'm using what people might call piano wire. So I cut them about 4 inches long. Slow the speed down. Now I generally experiment with a size. So I drill a hole in a block of wood, you know, with what I think is the right drill size. Make sure I get a good fit. Because you don't want it too big. You don't want a sloppy fit. Glue will hold it, but I'd rather it be a nice snug fit that I can tap in. So you want your speed down below 500. Don't need to get in a big hurry. Now, some lathes have an indexing on here. I think this one does. I can't see it, so I'm just going to look to what I think is about 1 1/4 inches. Okay, I see about where 1 1/4 inches is. And then lock this thing down and just slowly feed it. Let it find its center. Actually, I generally like to take a skew. I probably ought to show that. This is the way I normally do it. So let's do it the way I normally do it. I generally take the corner of a skew like this and just chamfer in a slight hole to make it a little easier for that bit to not wander. But we're not making rocket parts, so doesn't have to be perfect. Like I say, epoxy is very forgiving. You can see it flex a little bit. Just ease it in, let it find itself. Now, if your headstock and tailstock are not in good alignment, you know, you're going to wallow a little bigger hole. When it starts squealing, it's time to back it out before it traps your drill bit, because it can do that. This stuff's kind of like popcorn. it gets hot, the steam, and next thing you know, it's buried in there and it ain't coming out. All right. Any questions so far?
Just a comment,
Uh-huh.
you wanna be careful about touching that drill bit after you pull it
Well,
out.
you got that right. That drill bit is very hot. The other thing you want to be careful about if you're retracting the drill chuck, always keep your hand on the drill chuck, because if it does get stuck, you retract it, this stays stuck, and then bad things happen. This thing starts whipping around, and sooner it's going to reach a point where it's going to throw it at you or into you or something. So with this mixture, the ratio is 1 to 1 to 4. 1 part beeswax, 1 part diatomaceous earth. It's this white, it's a fossilized algae that's a couple of million years old. It's basically the same ingredient used in the triple E buffing compound we have in the Beal buff or the Penn State buffing system. So we're just going to rub this stuff on there.
But you only made it two ingredients. What's your other ingredients?
Mineral oil. So, you know, what you do when you got your crock pot, you make your first batch out of beeswax, and you make another batch just like it, except you add a part of diatomaceous earth equal to the beeswax. Then after that, you can decide whether you want it a little heavier or a little thinner. Matter of fact, from that, I would probably go up, maybe add another 10% mineral oil. And that's by weight, not by volume. The specific gravity of mineral oil is such that it takes like 1.188 ounces, liquid ounces, to equal 1 ounce of weight. Now, is this a practical way to make this stuff? Well, probably not for the average person, because you know you got to go out and buy the beeswax. Usually you got to buy about a pound worth, which would be more than a lifetime supply for you and 2 or 3 of your buddies probably for this stuff, maybe. The diatomaceous earth, you only use a little bit of it. You bought about an 8-pound sack. But if you do it as a club, like I did this past week at my club up at Chattahoochee when we do hands-on wood turning, you know, 7 people walked away with a supply of each of these at a fraction of the cost of buying it. All right, now we're going to part this thing off.
Mike, does this dry pretty quickly?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically creating a slurry, kind of like the other, and sort of getting it, but mostly you're rubbing it off. You know, when you finish,
Penetrating.
a little bit, I mean a little bit, just like the beeswax did, but mostly it's cutting the scratches, and you keep doing it until it's clear. And if it's still not clear, you can put a couple of drops of walnut oil or mineral oil on top to clean any stuff off. This is not what you'd want to use under lacquer. So it's great for an oil based finish. I use Minwax antique oil because that's my favorite. It's simple, it's easy. I'm never in a hurry, so I don't mind if it takes me 4 or 5 days. I put it on the night, you know, when I finish my project next morning. Anytime next day I put on a second coat, and then after that I wait 24 hours, and then after about however many coats I like to build up, might be 3, might be 4, might be 5, I'm done, then I buff it, typically. I wouldn't have to buff it if I use this UV Triple E. That's technically called a catch. I wanted to demonstrate that for y'all.
Hey, you gotta do that.
When you do that entry cut, you ought to come straight in at 90 degrees. Here's the bevel. Go straight in. Or always brace your finger. I'm just getting rid of waste wood back here. Give me a little more clearance to part this off. So now I'm going to go back to that tool with a little pointier, because it's a little easier to get down in here for this kind of detail. Okay, that looks about like I like it. So now I'm going to take a parting tool, and I'm using a thinner parting tool. I don't know where they sell this model here, but they can order it for you. This is Penn State. It's about half the price of a Sorby. It's high-speed steel, made in China, but you know, so what? Works good. It looks almost identical to the Sorby. The shape, the thickness. Got a little different handle, and this has got one of these Peachtree Special handles that we got in a goodie bag some years ago. You put it in hot water, it gets real hot, and I looked at it and I, what am I going to use that thing for? And I thought, yeah, this would be perfect for this. And I wrapped it around this handle, and you squeeze it and get you know, so works great. So now, being real careful not to get stuff caught in a chuck, I'm going to part this off. And I don't grab it, I let it fall in my hand, because if you grab it, you're going to tear out these fibers. Let's set that here, so we take this off. Now here's where the magic comes, the elegant comes. But wrap a little tape on it. The jaws in the middle will just clamp around that copper, usually. If not on this jaw set, another jaw set, but I think it'll work on this one. And that's where the bead comes in. You press this down against that bead, and it acts just like I did on the tenon I put on that basic block of wood. You've got that surface that registers against the bottom of the jaw set. And then when you clamp it down, it may run off just a little bit. If it does, you can loosen it, twist it a quarter of a turn, see if you can get a little bit of that run out. But for what we're doing, it wouldn't make a lot of difference. All I would do is part this off. But we're going to do that with another block of wood. So let's pretend this is the bottom of our handle. And now we just get out your choice of texturing tool. I think they sell both of these here. This is a Robert Sorby. It's got a texturing wheel, and it's got some spiraling wheels. The spiraling wheel is what I used for, but it cuts a spiral. Thank you. The other tool, this is one of Ron Brown's best texturizing tool. It's a knurling tool. So you engage this like this. Give yourself a little bit of room so that the tool is not spinning on your tool rest. You want to cut just about on center. You could cut high or low with this particular tool. You get a slightly different pattern, so it's something you're going to play with a little bit. And I like a little circle in the middle, so I back off this thing by like maybe 3/32. Little, what's half of it? 3/16 of an inch from the center, so I'll have a maybe 3/8 inch little dot in the middle, circle in the middle. But I don't measure it. Now, speed-wise, you don't want to go too fast on this texturing. For this particular tool, 600 to 800 is probably fine. Now, generally, it helps if you engage on one side, so I'm going to catch the corner, but I'm bracing it with my hand, and I'm just holding it in place. Now, people that don't have good luck with this tool is because they get impatient, and you got to hold it there. Then you can slowly bring it around to get the full surface, and you got to count to about 30 Mississippis, depending on the density of the wood, because this is not cutting it, it's embossing it. So it's got to go over and over and over, and you got to press pretty hard. Now I got a little too close, didn't have that little round button. That's okay. Just a little different design. So now I use my point tool again, because when you do any texturing, you want to frame it. So we'll put a little bead outside like that. Now if we wanted to use a texturing tool, spiraling tool, you know, we can come back, slow this thing down a little bit. For this spiraling tool, you really need to get your speed down to about 400. Much more than that, you wind up tearing it up, because this soft bronze bushing doesn't take heat or pressure real well. So we're just going to catch the corner of this just to give a little extra texture. And that gives a few little dots. We could quit there, or again, we could boundar it just a little bit, border it. And now, to kick it up a notch, use something called gilt cream. Let's see. Let's put a little of that beeswax. Normally, you want to have some kind of finish. We're going to use a little Renaissance wax. It's a microcrystalline. Again, that's an oil byproduct. It's real pricey, but it lasts forever. Or seems like it does. I've had this can for years. I don't put it on everything I make, but what we want to do basically by putting a finish, a friction finish like Hut or Mylands, or even a little coat of shellac is not bad. I want to put something on there to help protect that surface so this gilt cream we're going to put on there doesn't get embedded in the pores and I'm not going to be able to clean it out. So now we use any number of things. You can go to Michael's or Hobby Lobby and get something called Rub and Buff, or you can get this stuff. They may have some product here. This is from Chromacraft, a Georgia-based company. It's called Accent Paste or Gilt Paste. We're going to use gold. So you put this on your finger, just a little bit. Probably ought to be wearing gloves, but it's not going to matter. Now, with this particular stuff, there's two ways you can apply it. But this is designed to go down inside the texture, not on the surface. It doesn't hold up real well on the surface, from what I understand. That's why it's called an accent paste. So you got to really get it down into that texture. I watched Nick Agar up at Dalton here recently, and he went into a lot of detail about the difference in these types of gilt creams. And same thing with Rub and Buff. It's not designed to sit on the surface. It's designed to get inside. So now we can just kind of polish this off and hope it'll get some of it off the surface. But even if it doesn't, it still highlights that texturing. Now, if we don't like the gold on that ring, you can use something like mineral spirits or just a little bit of Renaissance wax. And just apply it. If you got one of those little white magic erasers to clean your wall from your grandkids' fingerprints, that works good too. But just go on that flat area, and it's cleaning it up some. How much, I don't know, and that's where the finish, having a finish coat on there really makes a difference to keep it from getting inside those pores, because once you get inside those pores, it's not coming out. But anyhow, there you go. How much time we got left? Okay, let's talk about sharpening a little bit. Now, most awls that y'all are probably familiar with got a round tip, right? You ever try to start a hole with one of those things? Did you have any luck? They don't go very deep because eventually you're going to split the wood if it's thin. So there's this, I published an article I said about wood turning design, and you don't have to know too much to write an article, just enough to be dangerous. You know, I made a couple, so I said, yeah, I can write an article. So I wrote an article. Then I get this email from a guy in Australia who's telling me about a birdcage awl and what a superior grind it is. And it was the grind on awls back in, early days, 1800s, when they had all kinds of manner of fowl that they made cages for, farmers and everybody, and they would use a birdcage awl to drill a hole into like bamboo-sized pieces of wood, not real big, and then they'd run wire through it because it's got 4 sides. Now you're going to need to do a really close-up on this. Can you get a close-up on that?
If you're in camera. Right there.
Okay. So you can see it's got 4 bevels to it. And then it's got a micro bevel because this is not high-speed steel. You can blue it and ruin the temper. So when you get pretty close, before it blues, you got to quit, and then you put the micro bevel on with a hone, either CBN or a diamond hone. And just put it on the flat surface and then elevate it a little bit. Now when you grind this thing, it's kind of tricky. You want to go down about the last inch or inch and a quarter. wrap this, color this thing with the felt tip pen so you got a nice solid dark surface. And then you want to, it helps if you use a little jig. I find it easier to do on a belt sander. If you got a belt sander, I find that's the easiest way to grind these things. But grind it on one side, quench it regularly to keep it from bluing on you, on that surface, and take that one down almost to the middle, then go flip it over to the other side, quench it before you put your finger on it, because it's going to be like that drill bit. It's going to be hotter than hell. So you put your finger on it so you can feel that flat, and then get the other side. So you got two opposing sides, and then after that, come back over. You're going to have this side with it's got the ink on it. You do the same thing. You feel it, or actually you're going to go 90 degrees. So you're going to see the flat side that doesn't have any ink on it, and get that side, and then do the other side. Now, if you do it on a grinder, you can make you a little jig, take a stick, drill a hole in it where this thing will slip in. This is a 3/16, not a 5/32. I use 5/32. Did I pass the one around? I didn't. Here's the number. Now there's a handout on this whole demonstration on the, going to be on the Gwinnett website if it's not already out there, Rob. That's got the model number, and the easiest if you want to buy this stuff, here's what you're buying. You're buying 7 rods. That's 36 inches long, longer than this, had a piece cut off, of this music wire. You cut this thing at 4 inches, so you can see it's fairly inexpensive, but it comes in like 7 rods for the 5/32, maybe 5 rods if you go to the 3/16. I like 5/32. Nothing wrong with 3/16, but I think 5/32 is a good size for me. So you get 7 rods for about $18, I think. And if you want to try to find it, here's the easiest way to find it. You go out to my YouTube channel, go down in the comments, and you'll say, hey, if you want to support my channel, go out to my Amazon shop, because I'm an Amazon influencer, and you go in that portal, and I'll have a page of all kinds of wood turning stuff that I'm familiar with, that I endorse and think it's a good product, and you can find this thing there. And that's the easiest way probably to find it. And I get a tiny commission. Very tiny, but you know, it all helps. So if you do this on a grinder, you can put it on your platform and do it like this.
Give me a second.
This is kind of challenging to do this because it's going to be slightly concave. You might get this thing flat. Like I say, if you got a sander, works great. I use one of those rigid oscillating spindle sanders, and they work great. But you could come up near the side of it like this. Generally, they don't recommend sharpening on the side of one of these stone wheels, but if you're careful, wear face protection, you know, you can do it like that. It's going to get hot real quick if you keep your finger on it, keep it from spinning, so you'll know when it's heating up. So those are 2 different ways to do it. Now, the birdcage awl is my favorite. However, there is another one I recently found out about that's called, how many of y'all ever heard the term brad awl? It's kind of interchangeable in practical usage with the term awl. But here's what a brad awl is shaped like. It's like a little tiny little screwdriver.
Put it on top of the big wood one time, on the bigger chunk of the wood, yeah.
Tiny little screwdriver. Now what it does is you put it in across the grain and push down, and it slices the grain. Then you give it a twist. Then you come back and do it again if you want to go deeper and give it a twist. Now what this winds up doing is it leaves all the fibers in here intact. So when you put in a screw, the fibers will kind of come back in place and clamp around it. The birdcage awl, on the other hand, is shearing those fibers as it goes around and is making a hole. But all the fibers around that hole are going away. This one is fat. The birdcage awl is faster and easier, and for a starter hole for a screw, you know, that's the way to do it. But I thought I'd play with this brad point awl to see how I liked it, but I don't like it quite as much, but it does work. If you were doing little boxes, for example, with tiny little brass screws, I would experiment with a brad awl, because you know those screws are soft and you want to give it as much support as possible. So that'd be something worth playing with. It's a heck of a lot easier than drilling a hole.
Can you pass them around when you're?
Sure.
And because, like you said, it's not taking the fiber out, therefore when you put that brass screw in.
It's all there.
It's all come back.
It's all there, yeah. So awls, they're also used, if you've got a friend that does leather, you can make a leather awl. You can use it for, leather is the main one. And like I say, if you got somebody that anybody that needs, it's not a wood turner, anybody that has a toolbox can use an awl. Anybody with a toolbox, because you can use it to scratch and scribe a line, you can use it to drill starter holes, you can use it to, you know, poke a hole through a drywall. Any other questions? Been a great audience. Thank you very much. I'll be around for a few minutes. If you got any questions, give me a holler.